Welcome to T.S.O.B. with Dr. G, a podcast featuring intellectual table talk about race and sexuality. I'm your host, Dr. Tracy Q. Gilbert, a sexuality educator, writer, and researcher. Join me as I talk with the most brilliant minds in human sexuality, applying a professional Black lens to discussions about sexiness, health, and healing in the new millennium. It's T.S.O.B., the sex ed of Black folk. Let's get to the get down, shall we? Hello. Welcome to another episode of T.S.O.B. with Dr. G. I'm Dr. Tracy Gilbert, and I am super excited and happy to be with you all today for another episode. What can I say? I just have the most charmed life where I get to speak to some of the dopest people in the work that I do. People who not only are just superb at what they do in their particular niche in this work, but they inspire me to keep going on days where I'm like, why am I doing this? And I know folks who might be listening are like, well, why wouldn't you want to be a sexuality educator? But I promise you, there are days when it's just like, why am I doing this? I could be doing something so much simpler. So today's guest is absolutely one of those people who just excites me so much and is just so awesome. So I'm going to read their bio and then we're going to go ahead and get into this conversation. I am talking about none other than Marla Stewart, who is just super dope. So let me read her bio. Marla Renee Stewart is a professional sexologist, intimacy, relationship, sex coach, speaker, and author. She is the owner of Velvet Lips, a sexuality education company, as well as Contract Liberation, a company focused on research for nonprofit group. As a faculty member at Clayton State University, she teaches sociology and women and gender studies. As the co-founder of Sex Down South Conference, Marla aims to bring diverse groups together to learn and share their experiences in the essence of being authentic and fostering sexual liberation across communities. Come on with that vision. Love it, right? Don't y'all love it? Marla has studied human sexuality for over 19 years, has educated over 20,000 people in over 13 years, given over 400 workshops, and has served over 100 clients in her private practice all around the world. She has had her influence in the media as well. She has written over 200 articles, featured in over 20 magazines and books, and has been on 30 podcasts and independent television shows. Now listen, that's all dope, but what I'm about to tell you now is really if you don't know her now, if you know Netflix Trigger Warning with Killer Mike, you know her from there. That was a moment, and we're going to talk about that during this conversation as well. She was featured on Trigger Warning with Killer Mike, the episode about being able to teach coachable skills through porn. I loved it. Through sexual explicit media, loved it. But she's also been on VH1's Love and HipHop Atlanta and was filmed as a sex expert for GPB's Personal Injury Court and Oxygen's Bad Girls Club Atlanta. In addition, she sits on the boards for SPARK Reproductive Justice NOW and the Diverse Sexualities and Research Education Institute. She co-wrote her first book, The Ultimate Guide to Seduction and Foreplay, in 2020 with Dr. Jessica O'Reilly, and is currently writing a chapter and co-editing An Intersectional Approach to Sex Therapy coming in 2021. Like I said, I know dope people and they bless me being willing to be on this show. So without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to TSOB, Marla. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you, Tracy, for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I've had the chance, I've been blessed to know you through a couple of other different avenues over the years, but just to read your bio, I'm just like, wow. You get so focused on your own work, you don't often think about what other people what all they're doing. So to read everything that you've done over your years, it's just stellar. And I'm just really humbled that you're here. So.
Oh, thank you.
So we are gonna chop it up about everything, but we have to start with the same question I start with all of my guests to really, really ground this in an appropriate way. My question is a three-parter. Where you from? Where your people from? And what's got you thinking about sex and sexuality these days?
So where I'm from, where my people are from, and what's got me thinking about sexuality?
Yes.
Oh, I think about sex all the time.
Right?
So, where I'm from, it's so interesting. So I'm actually from, I was born in East St. Louis.
Okay.
And my mom was a single mom, just not was like, I cannot have my baby living here. So
Mm-hmm.
the day after I turned one, we got on a plane and went to California,
Ah.
where I pretty much lived the rest of my life. Well, not lived the rest of my life, but grew up there and in Northern California, and then came to Atlanta when in 2004 after college and for grad school. And then, yeah, I was living in Atlanta for about 14 years and then fell in love, moved to Florida,
Yes.
and now I go back and forth between Florida and Atlanta. So it is, that is sort of where I'm from. I'm from originally from Northern California. So when I
Yes.
think about like life philosophies and where they come from, they are from California. And I just
Mm-hmm.
have brought myself and my philosophies to the South, which has been tremendous in the way that for me, that I've helped people to really see their authenticity. And so
Yeah.
where my people are from, is this like a familial question or is this just like my communities? Like,
Well, I think about it in terms of like your roots, your ancestors, and that sort of thing. But I
ah,
think you raise an important point, about the difference between our chosen families and our blood families and whatever. So you answer in a way that's authentic to you. I know for me, I think about, my roots, but, whatever feels authentic to you.
yeah, I think being Black in America is difficult to even go back to our roots. And I think for me as a queer person, to acknowledge family that has accepted me, which means I have had to cut family off. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, as far as like chosen family, so my roots are definitely Native American, Lakota, and along with being Black, and then Irish. That's where the
Mm.
Stewart comes from. And yeah, that's pretty much all I know about my family tree in a sense of all the other cultures besides Black,
Sure, sure,
that's
sure.
in there. So they all came from the Midwest, or they were in the Midwest. The last that my mom and I traced back our roots. And yeah, and as far as like where like when I think about like sort of my chosen family and my communities, we are everywhere. I think I live in so many different communities. It feels really beautiful to, to have access to all these different types of folks. So,
Yeah, yeah.
so yeah.
That's beautiful. And you have me thinking about the ways that even queerness can help us diversify, I guess, for lack of a better word, diversify kind of where we root ourselves and where we see our family and where we see our home. And so I'm curious what that journey was like for you to like have this Black and native root, but then to understand like I need to be able to like make connections elsewhere because this ain't it. This isn't fully it. What was that like for
Yeah.
you?
I think part of it is hard because like the disconnection, especially from my like Native American roots or even my Irish roots, the disconnection is intense in the sense of, being Black and not necessarily having community. It was me and my mom,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so finding friends, finding family is something that I've always done. And even in it's funny because when I went to Carnival for the first time in Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, these are my people. Like, oh, like, and it's really funny. So it's sometimes I get it when people are like, I like this community, even though I'm not from the islands,
Right.
but
It's
I
resonant.
felt like this is who I need to be. This is who I felt a strong affiliation
Yeah.
towards that. And so, but it's hard to just be like, I'm not like a Rachel Dolezal or anything, but at the same time, it's like being Black and I'm being a Black American in island cultures. And, it's kind of
Yeah.
like I feel accepted, and at the same time, it's sort of like it's not necessarily my culture, but I feel like I belong here.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
And I think there
so
is a certain expansiveness that's required in order to thrive as a Black person in America, right? You have to be willing to like branch out and be more than one thing, because we are so much more than one thing, and so much of that history has been polluted and distorted in a lot of ways, where it's like to be Black is to always be in creation and to always be evolving and always be in the process of becoming. So I love that. Absolutely. And I also want to establish for the record, shouts out to another person from the Midwest, that East St. Louis is not St. Louis. And so when you said East
that's
St. Louis,
right.
I was like, ooh, yes,
You're
I get
saying,
why.
you
East
get
St.
why my
Louis is
mom was like,
not a
"Oh hell, I
game.
gotta go."
Right. East St. Louis is
Mm-hmm.
not a game at all. So
Mm-mm.
shouts out to anyone who comes from those areas. Okay, so we've got the baseline foundation of Marla. How did Marla get into sex? How'd you get into doing this work?
It's so interesting because, like, my mother, I definitely grew up sort of sex positive, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
because my mom, she did not want me to be a teenage mother like she was.
Mm-hmm.
And so she really just was like, gave me all the books,
Mm-hmm.
all the education, was just like, if you're feeling horny, this is what you do. If
I love
you're,
it.
if you like someone and you want to have sex, this is what you do, like, so she really was just like, this is a hard journey for me and I don't want you to go through this.
Yeah.
And so even when I came out at 16, at the time I came out as bisexual at 16, so my mom was like, oh God, I don't even know. Like that, this is a whole different beast. Here's she was like going to P flag meetings, and she was just like, here's an educational pamphlet.
Right.
Basically she gave me like a lesbian sex pamphlet and was like, I don't know what they do, but be
Yes.
safe. Here you
Yes.
go. Like, she was really like my rock, and it was embarrassing, as a
Uh-huh.
teenager. You're just like, stop, leave me alone.
He's
But
like, I'm gonna love you through this. I don't know what we're doing, but I'm gonna love you anyway.
yeah,
I'm gonna love you through it
yeah.
all. That's how I'm gonna
So
show
she
up.
struggled a little bit. My dad definitely struggled a little bit because he struggled a lot more, I should say, because he's very much Bible.
Mm.
You can't tell him nothing because the
Mm-hmm.
Bible says it all. But he's learned to, me and one of my other brothers is gay. And so it's sort of like, having two queer kids out of three,
Mm-hmm.
they finally, they are okay. My parents
Right.
are okay.
Yes.
But, yeah, it was, I think that kind of helped foster like the acceptance and authenticity of who I was, and
Yeah.
like being able to be like, okay, this is who I am. So when I went to college, I was just like, I am who I am. I'll date who I date, So my first year, I think I dated a guy on the baseball team. And then I was like, I was also playing women's basketball. I was on scholarship. So I was, fucking a couple other teammates.
Yeah.
It was like, I was just kind of all over the place.
Right.
Fucking a soccer player,
Being what you should be in your late
Yeah.
teens, early 20s, all over the place, trying all the things out. Because
Right. I was
why
like,
not?
it's college. I'm in a dorm. I'm whatever. I'm free, So
Yes.
anyway, so I really had a chance to just do what I wanted to do, and I think with the lessons that I learned with my mom about sexual responsibility really helped me to navigate that. So much so that people came up to me and would ask me about sex questions, would ask me about orgasm, would ask me relationship, if they were having relationship issues or problems or communication stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
so I was studying it. So I was studying drama and psychology, and
Mm.
yeah, and that's pretty much, and human sexuality.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, so that's kind of how that journey got started. And by the time I got to Atlanta for graduate school, I was like, I know I want to do something in sexuality. This is actually what I want to do. I want to teach people how to touch people. And then one of my best friends was just like, just do it now. Like, start your business now while you're in grad
Yeah.
school. And then that way, by the time you're out, your business will be going and whatnot. And so that's
Right.
what I did.
Right. Oh my gosh. I love that story so much. And what's coming up for me too is like, I feel like there's so many stories on conversations I've had with folks on the show where they talk about their moms. And I want to shout out Black moms in particular because, and especially in your case, Black teen moms, because the narrative of Black teen moms is not what you had in terms of a mother being like, oh no, I'm going to teach my child and I'm going to make sure she has what she needs and I'm going to come from a positive angle, right? There's so much gloom and doom that's assigned to teen motherhood and teen parenting, period. And so I want to shout that out and really push back because I think particularly in a lot of the traditional education, sexual health education models, the idea of like, oh, teen pregnant moms, oh, dun, 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 that's like the end. But it's like, no, actually, there's definitely stories of empowerment and it's not the end of a person's life to have a baby at a young age and not even the end of the child's life. So I want to.
Right. And then also to like not to think that you'd be a single mom forever, right? Like I
Yeah.
grew up with whom I call my dad, who is my stepdad. But I've been knowing him since I was 5, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
then they got married when I was 7. So it was like I grew up with very much a nuclear family,
Mm-hmm.
with my 2 brothers as well.
That's
So
beautiful. Ah, I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, so my next question, I think you are actually one of the people because I know that there were a series of superhero cards that were just released, and you were one of the people that actually
yeah,
got a superhero card, right? So why don't
yes.
you tell the folks what your superpower is, and any other superpowers that you feel like didn't fit within the boundaries of the card in terms of sex ed?
I gotta tell you, when I was doing this, I was like, this is going to be printed and it's going to be everywhere. And how, like, what are the things that I really want to say? So it was really difficult
Mm,
to think about these things. So
yeah.
on the superhero card,
And it's
and
a
they
She
got
Five superhero card. So the folks who are like, what superhero card? She Five superheroes cards. They're out. There's a whole set of them. So Google find you a set if you're interested.
yes,
So
and my set is sold out right now. The series
of course it
3.
is. Of course it is. Because everybody wants a Marla Stewart superhero card. Duh.
So, yeah, I'm glad I was quick to get on it. My hidden talent. Oh, what I really love about the superhero cards, they got all my tattoos and everything in there. I was like,
Yes.
wow, that's amazing. I don't know if you could
Accuracy
see
for the
that.
win.
I was like,
Yes, yes, yes,
uh,
yes.
I was like, wow, that's impressive. Um, anyway, my hidden talent, I said, was seducing people without them even realizing it.
Yes.
And a lot, I think that comes from my, just my eyes in general. When I talk to people, I'm very intense at looking at people. But what's interesting is that I've gotten 2 responses that people generally think. 1, I'm seducing them, or 2, that I'm high. So
Mm.
I don't smoke, so
That is funny.
it's sort of like I'm not high and I'm not seducing you. I'm actually just looking at you, but
Right, right.
but people think it's one or the other. So I think it's really funny. So anyway, I just said seducing people without them even realizing it. And that is my specialty. I mean, since writing the Ultimate Guide to Seduction and Foreplay, I do know how to seduce people.
Yeah.
Um, and then it says the weapon of choice. And I just said authentic love and my glorious mouth because I feel like my mouth is really talented in some areas.
Ow. Shots
Uh,
out. Yes.
and and then my superpower is turning people's flaws and weaknesses into strengths and sexual assets.
Yes. I love
Um,
that. Yes.
Yeah, so I really feel like I help people when I'm helping them building up their sexual confidence. I help them to really see like, hey, these flaws actually have some positive things about them. So let's focus on those things rather than what keeps you down. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so then the last part is my mission, which is my mission is to invoke pleasure activism and sexual strategy in your life so that you can build your sexual arsenal and take advantage of all the pleasures life has to give you.
Yes, I love
So,
this so much. Yes, yes, yes. Like when as you're reading, I'm like, yes, everything and again, I don't know the full universe that's Marla, but everything I know about you, I'm like, yeah, all of this fits. Absolutely, all of this fits. But what I really love, which is one of the main reasons I was like, I have to get you on here, is just the ways that you get me thinking and introduce thought around the relationship between sexuality and power, and the way, like thinking about seduction, like you said, and just how power is negotiated in sexual acts, whether it is between people or it's how you show up in a space and all of that. Can you talk a little bit more to the folks about your perception of that relationship, and maybe even talk a little bit about how that even shows up in sex ed in terms of power, and even discussions about power that you might have with some of the folks you work with?
yeah. So when I think about power in particular, and it's not, and I'm taking it out of maybe a student teacher context,
Mm-hmm.
I often think about our privileges and power and what that means. So it's like if if I'm talking to a client and I'm seeing that, maybe it's a heterosexual couple, and thinking about what kind of power dynamics that are happening in their relationship, and really seeing like, hey, you need to help out with the house, or you need to do this thing, or you need to do that thing, or like really seeing the dynamics so that it can be on something a little bit more equitable, so
Mm-hmm.
that they do feel good about their sex life, because most of the time these relationship problems are on things that are outside of their sex life, and their sex life is just suffering because of it.
Mm-hmm.
So all these communication issues, all these issues, just maybe, maybe it might be even around trauma, infidelity, things like that. I help them navigate as far as power. So thinking about the intersectional dynamics, race, gender identity, all of these different things. Who has the more money in the relationship often,
Mm-hmm.
can play a huge factor into how that power is seen in the relationship. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
yeah, and so that's how I think about power in that sense. And then also, power in the teacher student relationship is knowing that everything that I say is so important, because I know they're going to hang on to every single word.
Mm-hmm.
Because of my experience, because of my background, it's really important for me to make sure that I get the right messages out, and get the right information out, so that they have a full understanding of what they need to do or don't do
Yeah.
in order to achieve sexual success.
Yeah,
So,
that's so important. Yes, that's so important. And I
mhm.
appreciate you raising that point, because I know we have a lot of folks who listen to this show who are educators or who aspire to be educators, but often don't. I perceive them not to think too often about the power that they hold in the classroom as the educator, as the person who is not only teaching content, but I always talk about they teach people how to think about the topic and how to think about the content. So if they're coming in from a sex negative model, that's one thing. But even if they're coming in from like a clinical perspective versus a pleasure based perspective versus a community based, all of that can affect how the learner comes to see not only sex and sexuality, but how they come to see themselves as a sexual being. And so I really appreciate you elevating that point as well. Um, Going back to what you said about like introducing race and thinking about race, especially when you're thinking about couples and that sort of thing. Um, when you think about sex and power and Black folks in particular, what's one or two or however many things that you feel like are I'm trying, like my head always, it kind of goes to what do we get wrong, but I think the better question is what are the opportunities for growth, do you feel like, among Black folks when it comes to sex and power and understanding that, and doing better around that conversation?
I think one of the key things that I've learned living in the South and being in the South and helping couples in the South in particular is the gendered tropes, the Southern identity tropes. So the Southern belle, the Southern gentleman, getting away from those because those are socialized patterns that have been harmful for people. So the Black folks who prescribe in those things, they tend to not be authentic, or they tend to be like, well, if I don't do this thing, then I will be seen as, so they really focus on what other people think. And I think one of my things is just, I don't give a shit, like I don't care
Yes.
what other people think because I'm living my own life and I'm having a great time doing it.
Right.
Don't you want to do this thing that I'm doing? Like, don't you want to have fun and just
Or
like
don't you want to
not
do your
give
own
a
version
shit?
of this thing? Like,
Yeah,
don't you wanna
version
just
of
do
this thing. Yeah. Like, do you have fun? Let
Yeah.
go of all those messages. And I think sometimes it's really hard because thinking about media, social media, how our socialization patterns, our familial patterns, our religious patterns really take hold, especially at a young age, and try their hardest not to let go. And so I think that has helped me navigate different folks into saying like, hey, be authentic in yourself. So when I see, maybe even couples dynamics, like I have a Black couple right now who's just, they're so sweet and so amazing, and they're doing their job, doing what they need to be doing their homework most of the time.
Right.
And it's sort of like, oh, they might not know about something. You're like, oh, well, I thought this meant, like, no, that doesn't mean. So I feel like just the lack of education sometimes, and like I said, being here in an abstinence only, both Florida and Georgia are abstinence only states, and so it's just sort of like being in a space where you have not been fed all the information that should have, or that could have been fed to you, that could have helped you navigate your sexual life better. So with my Black couples, it is sometimes those prescriptions to things that aren't helpful or aren't very useful. I really have to break those down and say, hey, these are the reasons why that's probably not going to work for you.
Right. That's probably not the best. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Do you ever, so I always, and this is just based on things that I've read and conversations I've had with folks. Do you ever entertain conversations with your Black clients about race and how that shows up in their perceptions of what's good and not? Because sometimes I wonder too, how much of it is, well, and I assert that, and sometimes I think a lot of it is about the assumption of what we look like to white people, and like trying not to uphold stereotypes about our hypersexuality and all of these different things, when it's like nobody is looking at us. Like no one, like people might be, but do you ever entertain those discussions, or do you ever have clients who bring up race when they think about, or assumptions about what people assume about them as Black folks and their sexual expression, and how you, if so, I'm curious how you negotiate or navigate those conversations with them.
I think being here, I really have not had that discussion because there's so many Black folks here. You know what I mean? Like, so it hasn't really, that really has not come up as far as like what these, actually, you know what? No, there is one client that I have right now who has issues around her boss, but that's just like an additional stressor. It's not necessarily something that has affected her sexuality in a sense, with her boyfriend or anything. But no, I really, as far as the perceptions, I don't think I attract those folks.
Okay.
I think I attract more people who are probably a little bit more open, swingers, non-monogamous folks, queer folks, like and not necessarily queer, I would say heteroflexible, or have queer thoughts, or queer
Curiosities.
politics.
Yes.
um
Yeah.
so I tend to attract more of those kind of
Got
people.
you. And as you were talking, I was like, it kind of makes sense because if a person's really hung up on respectability politics, the last thing they're probably going to do is go get coaching from someone who is so against that
Right.
that it would push them to do something completely different. Yeah, I get that. That makes sense. And so I also love that you brought up the fact that you're in abstinence only states, because I think that also brings the connection back to the experiences of young people and with sex ed and how that affects their experiences as adults. I know you work mostly with adult clients, but do you ever have situations where maybe they're thinking, you interact with younger folks, or folks are talking about their experiences with with their young people in their lives, and how you navigate that in terms of where a young person doesn't even have their basic information, or they have where it's like, actually, I'm very comfortable in who I am, but I live in this state that's like ultra conservative and wants to take that out of me. And how do you negotiate that with younger clients?
Yeah, so when I started this business, before I started this business, when I was an undergraduate, I actually was on a doctoral scholarship as well. And so I had to do an undergraduate thesis.
Mm.
And so with my undergraduate thesis, I did it with an alternative sexuality center in the Bay Area. So I was already doing this research before with young people. So I was basically educating young people from the ages of 9 to 25.
Mm.
And so when I came to Atlanta, I just kind of continued along those lines. So I would go to nonprofit organizations who had young people or had young people programs and talk to them about sex and sexuality. So, like, all the adults, that were in charge would leave. And then, like, I would have these candid conversations with folks who were, 12 to 18,
Mm-hmm.
or I did like at one point, Atlanta had like an LGBTQ youth center. So I was doing workshops for them. I was going to different colleges. So speaking to college age folks, young people around sexuality. And so for me, it was more of helping them to say, like, hey, here are some alternatives. Here's what a healthy relationship looks like. Here's how to do safe, sex. Here's, the way to communicate to someone or whatever. Here's the way to talk about your body. Like, let's be connected. It's not,
Right.
this random thing that you have between your legs. Let's say,
Right.
this is your body. And
Right.
so really having them keep connected to their bodies, to make sure that they're asking questions, that they're not making assumptions, that they can go to somebody that they really trust, I thought was just really important. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, for me, I started off that way. So that's always sort of going to be in my sexuality roots. So for
Yeah.
me, as
Yeah.
a pregnant person getting ready to give
Oh
birth,
yes, yes. That's
I'm
also
thinking about like all of these things, right?
yeah.
Like, oh, how am I going to educate? Like, what did my mom do again? Like, like,
Right. What did she
it's a
share
whole
with
different
me?
world for me,
Yeah.
thinking about how I'm going to raise this baby. So,
Yeah.
um,
And I think it's so important. Like, to me, I just very clearly see, and I think of the Frederick Douglass quote that it's easier to. I'm gonna butcher it, but
it's
it's
okay.
it's something like it's easier to raise strong folks than to repair broken men, or something like that. Like, basically, it's
Mm.
easier to like work with someone when they're younger and like really
Mm-hmm.
give them the baseline that they need, versus what it seems to me like you likely do is have all of these people who come into your space with all of this limited foundational knowledge, and then you have to go back and like, okay, well, let's start here, let's start with your body and how it responds, let's start with this, start with that, and then work to building them up to get to a place of confidence and openness and authenticity and that sort of thing.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right about that. Because I used to feel guilty for the longest time for having a great childhood.
Mm.
Like I used to, because people are drawn to the trauma, or drawn to the stories that are like the stories of triumph, right?
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
just like, I come from a story of greatness, and I'm just trying to be more great, like
yeah.
there's no I overcame this thing. And I remember someone wanted me to do some like sexual storytelling, and they were like, well, what was your triumph? What did you have to overcome as a child? And I was like, nothing. I had a great childhood. It
It
was
was actually pretty
amazing.
freaking dope.
Yeah, like I have no complaints whatsoever.
Yeah,
And sometimes I think that's hard to hear for people because of
absolutely.
the of what they maybe have gone through, or whatever. And it's not a glorious story, right?
Hmm.
Like, you had a great childhood. Oh, whoop-de-doo, and you have a great adulthood. Okay, well, that's not very exciting. It's
Like
not
so,
drama. It's not TV worthy,
right. But
So,
it also sounds like it's been very pleasurable, and that's awesome. And I,
absolutely.
as somebody who I am very much in tune with some of more of the challenging narratives as it relates to Black people. I love the idea that, like, no, you can just have a regular degular life. You don't have to be Black and suffer. Like, it
Right.
doesn't have to be the woe is me narrative. Not to say that it should, we should deny and ignore the harm that's been done and the experiences that many of us have had that are kind of rooted in more of the trauma. But there should be a balance, right? Especially for a single teenage mom from East St. Louis. Like, she deserves all the things good.
Right.
So,
And not to say that we don't go through those things as we grow up, because I've definitely had some racist shit happen to me, which is why I didn't finish my PhD. You know what I mean? So it's sort of
mm-hmm.
like I think because my mom armed me with like, your Black is beautiful. This is how it's beautiful.
Yeah.
My mom made me sit down and watch Roots as a young person.
Come
And do you
on,
know how
listen.
that's a struggle as a young
Yes.
person? It's like, oh.
Look, full disclosure, I still have not watched all of Roots, and it's not because I'm not, because I have no problem understanding the pain, but it's long.
It is
It's
long.
it's long as hell.
But my mom had to sit me down and was just like, we're watching it.
We're
Like,
gonna watch it anyway.
right. And as a child, when you're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
shoot, my mom was like, nope, sit down.
You finna learn
We gonna
today.
watch Kizzy. We gonna watch all this.
Right, you gonna watch Chicken George, damn it.
Oh, yeah.
You gonna know your name ain't Toby. Damn it. I
Right.
love it. I love it. But that's the difference, right? And I think about my own work and the ways I theorize about race. Like, while there is this very strong anti-Black root that informs how a lot of us think about sexuality, there's also this undercurrent of pleasure and joy and positivity that informs, like, to where I know when I first got introduced to, like, sexuality as a profession and some of the theoretical perspectives, there was this whole thing about sex positivity and it was like, so you mean Luther Vandross? Like, I was like, I don't have a framework that looks at sex as negative. It's like, sex is great. and I
Hmm.
and I know it's absolutely informed by my cultural experience as an African American, and just some of the cultural things that we were exposed to that kind of had to bump heads with this other circle of, like, don't be hypersexual, don't be a statistic, don't be this, don't be that. And so I'm totally here for the story of having a different narrative. So
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting too, because it makes me think about like how my Blackness and queerness intersect. And coming from California, it was never an issue. Like, being Black and femme was like being
Mhm.
beautiful and celebrated. And
Yes.
I had like this mohawk, and I came to Atlanta, and they were like, the Black and queer people in Atlanta were just like, what are you doing? What is that? You have a mohawk? Why are you like that? Why? It was just like, there was
Wow.
so much put on them. Like,
Yeah.
it was sort of like, I was like, why do you look like everybody else in here? Like,
Mhm.
like, I was just thrown off by how a lot of people look the same. And then when people came up to me and be like, remember me? And I'm like, you look like everybody else. I cannot distinguish why, like how I would know you because
Right.
you look like everybody else.
Right. So
But
there's still that overarching kind of power structure of like, no, this
you
is,
should do this. You should look like this. You
yeah,
should be
even in
like
your
this.
queerness, it has to look like this. Yeah, that's so
Exactly.
important. That's so important to tease out. Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk about Killer Mike.
Yeah.
Well, I should just say, even just the trigger warning episode, I love that show so much. Or I love that episode, I should say. I didn't watch the full show. I just was like, oh, Marla's gonna be in this show. I'm gonna watch it. And I do teach sessions on some of my classes. I introduced the clips that you did in parts of that episode. Can you talk a little bit about for the folks who are like, what is this? Like, explain the episode a little bit and kind of talk about how you even got into it and what you feel like, what your experience of it was. I kind of, in my head, I'm kind of thinking about the takeaways, but just whatever you want to share about that show or about that particular episode, because I just thought it was really amazing.
Yeah, so the episode was called Fuck School.
Yes.
And it was really about like how the unemployment rates are high and what do people do when they're on unemployment? They're watching porn. And so there's a high correlation between unemployment and porn use, porn watching. Honestly, there's a high correlation between working and porn use, people watching porn at work. So anyway, with that said, the idea was, hey, we can teach you some life skills through the porn. So that way you can not only learn something, but it was sort of like this pleasure-based education, idea that Killer Mike had. So he just wanted Black folks to have realistic expectations of what they could or could not achieve. And, it can go either way. Yeah. Right, because it's sort of like one of those things when he talks to the kid and the kid's like little black kid's like, I want to be president, and right. Killer Mike's like, hold up, like, like let's dial it down,
Let's think practically,
yeah. So I don't necessarily think that you have to like dial it down or like think that you should only train kids to be like a certain thing or limit them in any way. And at the same time, it's sort of like you have to be diligent that, hey, not everybody is going to achieve these high expectations or be this person. And I had to learn that from sociology. I had to learn that from my mother, who went from welfare to middle class, to middle to upper class. I had to see that. Anyway, so so basically me and the handyman guy, I can't even remember his name now. I did it so long ago.
Well, one of the things, what I loved about it, like, I definitely think the social commentary piece of it is important. And I think some might argue that it could have been, a bit tongue in cheek and maybe we're not serious, but I was just really like, I don't know if this is serious or not, but imagine if we used porn in these ways to teach basic skills. Like, I was just in love with that. And so I think that's probably my fan question of like, was that real? Like, were y'all serious?
No. It's so funny because I got so many calls. I got so many calls that were like, "Can I have those porn that you were doing?" And I'm like, "That is a TV show." Yeah, I'm sorry, that is a TV show. That is not real. I don't do that, but it's
like,
a great idea.
My fantastical future.
Yeah, if I had the whole TV crew and the actors and the budget, sure.
I love that. I just love that. Okay, so that's just me and my pedagogical dreaming. But
hey, if you want to do it, I'll collaborate with you.
We're gonna do that. Be on the move with that. But I love that so much, and I just thought it just opened up such a powerful like a wonderful conversation about, to me, what the real power of sex ed could be, especially when it's, to me, I think intersectional and it speaks to what is actually going on in people's lives. It's like, y'all just don't like condoms. Yeah, that's one thing. Let's talk about life and let's talk about people's real time experiences. So that's why I was just really super moved by it. But anyway,
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun doing the directing of that, you know? It was like it was really fun. It was I had fun. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and as it should be, right? Like sex ed should be fun because sex is fun,
Mhm.
right? Ideally, right?
And we were just watching them. We're like, "Okay, wow, that's all right. Keep going," you know?
I love it. Okay, Marla. So let's say someone's listening and they're like, I love you, Marla. I think you're amazing. I think everything you're about is dope. And I want to learn more. I want to be able to uh, help my kids be more. Like, I really want to do this life that you feel like we should do in terms of owning our confidence, owning our seductibility, and all of these things. But I don't know where to start. What tips or ideas do you have for them to kind of begin that journey?
Um, so I think one of the first things you need to, I mean, is it this like self promotion or like,
Well, you can definitely promote yourself, but this is really just kind of like let's say maybe they're like, okay, before I do a consultation with you, like what might be some baseline things that I could do to kind of get myself on that journey?
absolutely. So I think a lot of reading, or maybe if you're into audiobooks, I think there are some great books out there that you should be reading. One of my first books that really inspired me was Sister Outsider by Audre
Yes.
Lorde.
Yes.
The uses of the erotic is power. That essay really, I mean, that changed my life of how
Same.
I thought about eroticism and power.
Hard same. Hard same.
Yeah. And then thinking about Black feminist theories and Black sexual politics, both of those really helped shape my ideas. But if those are definitely a little bit more academic. So if you wanted to do something, I would just say start with like some basic human sexuality books, because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people just don't know, they're just like, well, they don't know basic body parts,
Facts.
or
Facts.
so I would say a human sexuality 101 book that you might get is going to be very helpful. And let's see, I'm all like, what do I have on my shelf that I think is really great? I have so many books.
Yeah.
Um,
And you don't have to give exact book names. Just I always try to have folks share just a bit of coaching or bit of advice that you feel like if someone's like, I really could stand to be better at zhuzhing my life up.
Yeah,
And
and
so
take workshops. Absolutely. Like Google where the workshops are that are near you, or that, maybe your favorite educators that you really
yes.
like. Take workshops, because those can really help you, and they get the information, out to you quickly, rather than maybe you having to read a book or whatever the case may be. I know a lot of people don't read these days.
They'll
Um
read it if it's a meme.
I mean, shoot.
2 lines
Uh,
max.
so yeah, I would say like go to workshops. I would say follow your favorite people on Instagram who are really great content creators. I really like Afro-sexology's
Yes.
content. Folks who are out there just like disseminating information that can really be helpful for you in your
Yes.
life.
Yes, yes. Shouts out to Delisha, who was on the show on our first season.
Oh,
Definitely.
yes.
Yes. Afrosexology
Yes.
is dope. Absolutely.
Yes, they are. So yeah, I just think like, following your favorite people. Get the She Vibes superhero series, and just like look at what cards, Goody, Luna,
Yes.
like, some of my favorite people that are really just amazing educators. I think you should just be following. Yeah.
Yeah. Love it, love it, love it. Okay. So we're almost getting ready to wrap up, but I want to ask kind of my last formal question. Thinking about kind of your place now, as particularly as a Black sexuality educator, as we didn't even get into talking about sex down south, I kind of want to have you come back and maybe closer to the dates talk about that in particular. Maybe after you've had a chance to be one with your newborn and get comfortable, you
Yes.
can come back. But thinking about your who you are and kind of the influence that you've had in the field right now, particularly as a Black sexuality educator, what does it mean to be you right now at this moment in history, in terms of your impact, your significance, your role? What do you see that as?
Ooh, yeah. When I think about like legacy and my impact, like I really want to. I have like these big dreams of just being like the, Black queer educator to go to, like
Yes.
um thinking about like how mainstream or how I could help people in the mainstream, how I could help people, however that be in media. I have like this big dream of like being in like a major motion picture movie. I'm sure that's
Yes.
rooted in my original wanting to be an actor, like all of those things.
Yeah.
But
I totally see that. I see that. I have to say that what popped in my head is a kind of like a dystopian setting, like you being the sex educator in the dystopian setting. I love
nice.
that. I love it so much. I would totally go see that.
Yeah. So I guess when thinking about my legacy, I would really love the world to move in a direction of like, let's raise our children in a sex positive way. Let's raise our children in a way where they feel good. They have secure attachment. They feel like they can foster their sexuality. They feel that they have sexual responsibility. They feel like they can be authentic in who they are. Like, I would love for my job to be obsolete. Like I
Mm-hmm.
would love for people to really understand and be more sexually self-aware.
Yeah.
Um, so that is my hope for my own legacy, is just to, get people educated so that, we can live healthy and happy sexual lives.
Yeah. I love it. I'm here for it. Here all for that. All for that. Oh, my goodness. Okay, so we are just about done. I have my rapid fire questions if you are ready.
Okay.
Okay, so I have 5 sentence stems that I close off with everyone, and it's basically just fill in with whatever comes up for you.
Okay.
Okay, so the first one is sexiness is.
Love.
Hmm. Oh,
My
love.
answers might all be love.
Love will keep us together.
Yeah.
Okay. Beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, sexiness is being able to connect, really being able to connect with others. And I think when we are able to connect with others, that means we have embraced that part of love in ourselves, that we can see like, hey, I can actually come to you out of love even if I disagree with you. So for me, that sexiness, that being able to connect with someone and regard them as sexy, is through love.
Mm, love that. Love that. Okay. The sexiest thing about blackness and or black people is.
We are creative and innovative, and oh my god, like I love black people. We are like, it is.
It's lit.
I'm just astounded by like the creativity and just how beautiful we have these amazing ideas. I think we're fucking brilliant. So
Agreed. Agreed. My go-to for feeling sexy is.
ooh, I'm gonna have to say my go-to for feeling sexy is going to be like the music that I choose. So I really feel sexy to Lizzo's Worship. That is
Oh.
just like, that's how I feel. Like I just want, I just, it's like I need my lover to be obsessed with me. Like
Yes.
just
Hard same. Hard
worship
same.
me.
Hard same. Yep. My Mars is in Leo, which is a whole other conversation, but it is absolutely that you need to worship me.
Yes. Certain music, yeah.
Yes. Sexual freedom for black folk is achieved when.
Ooh, when we let go of the shame and stigma that holds us back from being our true authentic selves.
I love that. Yep. Last one. When I'm done being on this podcast, I will
go to brunch and do some work.
Back to the grind.
Back to the grind.
Yes, brunch. I love brunch. I miss brunch. That's so awesome. Marla, tell the people where they can find you on all the things. Feel free to humble brag, whatever you want to share in terms of how people can find you, how people can work with you, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. You can find me on my website, velvetlipsexed.com. You can find me, if you want to go to the Sex Down South conference, that's sexdownsouth.com. You can find me on social media at velvetlipsexed. That's, there's no E in the sex, or at one Marla Stewart. Or at SDSCon on Instagram. I'm not in charge of that Instagram, but we have our Instagram for that. You can also, buy your book, The Ultimate Guide to Seduction and Foreplay, yes. Techniques and Strategies for Mind-Blowing Sex, on my website. I think they're all sold out in a lot of places. So you can get your autographed copy from me on my website.
Copy.
I got plenty.
Yes. I will say I'm still kind of in you mentioned the trauma of PhD programs, and
oh yeah,
I'm still kind of in the tail end of that. So I have not read anything academic since 2018, but it is on my list to get your book.
Yes.
Like the only thing I read is romance novels these days.
You might like it. It's a nice,
But you're right. But I'm like, anything that requires me to think and sit and make notes. No, you're right. No, I'm getting the book. Please no. You will have a link to purchasing the book. I'm just also acknowledging anything that requires me to think extra hard is like, wow.
Oh yeah. You don't want to do that. Yeah. Not right now.
I don't want to think anymore.
Take a break. But so in addition to Sex Down South, I'm also going to be having it's called Dick Fest. So that's going to be happening in June. Okay. And I think that's pretty much it. I'm still building out some programs. I really want people to do what I do. So I'm building out a sexual strategy certification program right now. Yes. But you can go on my website if you want classes on dirty talk or how to initiate, or you want a kissing workshop, or you want to learn about squirting. You can find all of those things on my website.
I love that. And do I get the sense that you know something about kink? Am I wrong about that? Or do you have
kink is one of my specialties.
Okay.
There's floggers back here. I guess the paddle is cut off in the scene, yes. But I'm huge. I'm very much kinky person. So you can, there's a kink workshop in there. I teach the charm of choking, which is a dirty talk combo class with how to learn how to choke. I teach basic impact play. I've given presentations on the future of Black kink and what that looks like. And kink is definitely part of my life. I mean, it hasn't since the pandemic, but
right. I feel like that's a whole other episode.
Yeah, I'm definitely a kinkster. Yeah, for sure.
Love that. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being willing to be on with me, Marla. This was an amazing conversation. I'm so happy to have you and to be able to have caught you before you get into parenthood with the new one. If you don't have anything else, I don't have anything else. Thank you all for listening. I wish you all the best. We'll talk to you next time, and take care. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
You've been listening to T.S.O.B. with Dr. G, produced by Dr. Tracy Q. Gilbert of Tembe and Aya. To keep up with all things T.S.O.B., follow us on social media at T.S.O.B. the podcast, which you can find on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. For past episodes of the show, visit tsobpodcast.com or subscribe to the show either on YouTube or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Now, don't forget that you've got homework for this episode. To find the downloadable worksheet for this or any other episode of the show, head on over again to tsobpodcast.com, where you'll find it and any other important information from the show notes. And finally, do you have any questions or thoughts to share? Sound off by email at mailbox@tsobpodcast.com. Again, this was T.S.O.B, the sex ed of Black folk. Thank you for listening. Talk again soon.